Do you know what dogs and manhwas both have in common? They both produce dog crap. If you guys don't know what manhwas are, they are basically a mix of American comics and Japanese mangas where they and I'll specify this, sometimes have the detailed artwork of mangas but have the color from American comics. And what actually makes them pretty different from American comics and mangas is the format they're made out of isn't having multiple panels on one page. It's made where you actually read it through a mobile device like a phone, where you basically scroll up and the panels are made where you read it through the scrolling up process. And manhwas are actually basically just Korean comics. That's all they are. And the whole reason why I'm even discussing manhwas today is because after reading some stories of manhwas, there is a huge glaring issue with the manhwa community, and most of the time they're all complete garbage trash. But there's, of course, a few gems out there. But the gems compared to other spaces like comics or mangas, if you compare it to those, they're like a 7 out of 10. But if you compare to manhwa's uh, ratings, it's like perfect and peak. And I'm mainly just going to complain in this video about how terrible and how unoriginal and dog water manhwas are, and the majority of them are, and the few that are like not terrible, people just view as godsends or like perfect books when they literally aren't, and they're just mid-tier storylines. And the first topic I really want to touch on is so a lot of Korean manhwas are actually based on Korean light novels, and they kind of adapt them into the manhwa artwork. And a lot of the times, the stories have no originality when it comes to the plot, the characters, and a lot of the times, each character looks exactly like the exact same other one prior, and it's like rinse and repeat, copy and pasting the same crap, but with just a slightly different filter. And it's not even a filter. If you would compare it to Dead Nuts, how Apex Legends produces their legend skins, but they will say, oh, we have a new story now, but except it's the exact same skin, but just colorized differently, you know? It is basically that exact same concept, but melted into manhwas, where it's just the exact same character, but in a different skin. And it grinds my gears so much because you would read the plot, and the plot has either reincarnation or regression. And if you guys don't know what this is, I'll briefly touch on it. It's basically you die and then you get reincarnated to a different world, or you die but then you get sent back in time, like 10 years or so. And 90% of manhwas out there are based on this concept. And it's complete garbage because it is a concept that you could do so much with, but they all follow the same tropes and storylines and beats. Like I could look at a image and the title of a manhwa and guess probably how like the entire story's gonna go, how it's gonna end, how each conflict's gonna be, and hit the beats probably 90% of the time. And the only reason why I'm saying 90% is because, of course, there's going to be a little bit of difference between each story, but it's all going to just be the exact same thing. Kind of like a guilty pleasure of mine, reading these dog trash, dog water stories. And it just aggravates me because a lot of the times they try to make it like mature, but the characters act like they're 5. And it just, ooh, grinds my gears. And I'm getting too frustrated, dive into something else. But basically there's no originality, and I don't know who started this dumb trend of reincarnation and regression, but they need to stop. And they need to put their thinking caps on and actually use their noggins instead of ripping from every other story out there. Because so far it's just disgusting. With the storyline that I kind of touched on prior, how they have basically the same plot, but I really didn't mention characters much. I almost did, but I wanted to make this video more sectioned. And this section, oh boy, I got a lot to say. Now, there is a anime that came out recently called Solo Leveling, and people are glazing it because it is like the most hype show with like the best animation, and the actual source material has very good art with it and very good fight scenes, and it's really good. But if you put on your thinking caps and kind of like turn on your brain, you kind of realize that the only thing that's good about this story, Solo Leveling, is their fights. If there's no fighting going on or no conflict of war in general, you'd realize that you know nothing about the main character. All these side characters are just sandbags and just dummies to prop up the main character, and there is no depth, no fleshing out. You don't even know what these people experienced in the past other than basic dialogue, and just the most generic surface level crap ever for characters. And I think Solo Leveling is a very good reference to this because it is actually one of the better manhwas in the whole category. But the only difference is it has good art and it displays fights really well. But it has terrible plot development that makes kind of no sense at all. And the system they put in kind of defeats the purpose of caring for the characters, because halfway through the series, they're so goated that the like best of the best in the world can't even touch the dude. And that really puts a sour taste in your mouth for caring for the character and especially adding depth to the character. And this goes for almost every single manhwa out there except a few exceptions that actually put care into their characters. And this kind of bleeds into the story and the plot development too, because a lot of the times you can have very good plot development and somewhat surface level characters if you kind of focus on kind of like what Solo Leveling did, where it's about fights. But if the plot of the show, or the manhwa, I'll say, and the progression of it is so disjointed and simple, you need to add that in with character development. And if you don't get the character development, then there is nothing redeeming about reading the manhwa at all. And there's so many examples out there. And because they do that, they don't even bother adding character depth. Like, example, Berserk, Vagabond, and other mangas out there that actually add depth to their characters. And sometimes it's okay if the storyline is simple, but if you add depth to the characters, you care. And if you don't add depth to the characters, then have very cool world building and plot development where things make sense. And a lot of the times, they just don't. And most of the villains in manhwas are like 5-year-old children that spout out exactly what they're gonna do and then point their finger and say, go get that guy. And you know exactly beat by beat what's gonna happen. And the only reason why most people even read manhwas anymore is because it's a guilty pleasure and they have nothing else to do except read complete garbage and hope that there's a, not diamond in the rough, but something out there that isn't trash but is mid-tier. I feel so bad for my fellow Koreans, and I don't know if manhwas can. I know they can be made elsewhere, but I think they originally come from Korea, and I can tell because the titles look like hieroglyphics or Minecraft, and my dumbass can only read cheeseburger language. So I'm just assuming that. I could be completely wrong, but from just what I assume and think, I think it's made mainly from Korea, and this is where they mainly get their source of content, kind of like how Japan gets their mangas. And it's just saddens me because manhwas are actually being more mainstream now, where you actually find them in the Barnes and Nobles in your local area. And you could literally go on to Google and type up reincarnated manhwa and then just read some of the plot synopsises, and it is like dead nuts. And sometimes the like covers look almost eerily similar, where it's like Academy based, or they always have the magic in the stories. They never do anything original. And there's only like probably 3 books or manhwas that I've read that is actually original work. And it could, what I mean by original is something that isn't reincarnated or reincarnation or has a basic magic plot to it. Sometimes I add a twist, but that's it. Well, if you guys are sticking to the end with me ranting about this random topic, I'm glad that you did. And if you guys have any similar feelings as me, I'd love to hear it. I don't necessarily care, but it just aggravates me how there's so much of this slop being produced, and it's kind of like they know it's going to get views. And it just sucks. Like, you could turn on your brain and write something a lot better. And it just saddens me. That's all for today. Hope you guys like the rant. See you later.